All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of the Managing Partners Podcast. I'm joined with David Aylor out of Charleston, South Carolina. David, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, so if you want mine, let's start with introducing yourself as, on a personal level. Who is David? Where you live? Maybe something that you love to do, a hobby. And then, we'll dive into a little bit more business-related questions.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm originally from Spartanburg, South Carolina, which those not familiar with the state is in the upstate, about 3 hours from where I live now, which is Charleston, South Carolina. And I went to undergrad down here in Charleston at College of Charleston and got my law degree from University of South Carolina. Ended up coming back down here after that. I have a 16-year-old son and 2 dogs that tear up my house a lot. As far as things that I enjoy, of course, it's going to be generic and say something to do on the water since we live on the water. But, there are more interesting things, but they may not be appropriate for today's podcast. So I'll just keep going. I have my own firm here. We have 3 different offices, and one is the main one, of course, in Charleston. And then there's North Charleston, as well as Myrtle Beach, and then a satellite office then in Walterboro as well that we work out on occasion. And I've been practicing here for just about 15 years, started as an assistant solicitor. Again, for those who aren't familiar with that term, just think prosecutor, essentially. I did that and moved into real estate, somewhat hit that crash, which didn't go over so well, and moved back into law and have been practicing civil, personal injury litigation, as well as criminal ever since. I still hold a part-time position as a city prosecutor, still being on the other side a little bit, gives me a lot of insight to things. And we are now about to move into our new building we put together. It's a 3-story building not too far away from where I'm sitting today in North Charleston, and look to expand from there, both here locally as well as other areas of South Carolina.
Oh, wow, that's excellent. Okay, so you got a pretty cool background there, and then it sounds like you also have aggressive plans to keep growing and some exciting stuff happening. So, and I'll get to some questions here in a minute, more in detail about that. But so you just got a new building. Of course, we had COVID last year, and that was interesting. So, how just real quick, how did that impact the new building, the new space, and how that's been going as far as going into that space?
Well, just like anybody that's ever done new construction, whether it be residential or commercial, you always hit so many different brick walls along the way. And we definitely did that leading up to COVID. And then, of course, once that hit, we were delayed quite some time. And, just like everybody else, for a lot of different reasons, it was frustrating. At the same time, we knew we'd get to an ending point. And it helps us sort of align some other priorities in the office that we could handle then, as opposed to having to wait till once we got in the building. And we hope to be in the building somewhere within the next 5 to 6 months. Of course, you can't hold to that date, right? But yeah, as far as COVID goes, essentially it was no different than anybody else. When the state was on complete lockdown, there was little to no work to be done on new cases. We were fortunate enough to have a lot of cases that were still progressing and that were historical from prior to COVID. But the signups went down tremendously because essentially people weren't out and about and involved in various things that are what brings our cases to the office. South Carolina leans conservative Republican, so our state opened up fairly quickly as compared to some other states in the nation, particularly ones with higher populations. And so we started to see a turn, I would say, early this year, particularly, and then really even going all the way back to latter part of last summer. And then now I'd say we're back at almost full speed, particularly because of the courts opening back up.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we definitely, with our clients and listening to what they had to say is definitely a slowdown and a concern of a slowdown. Never thought about the states reopening sooner being a positive effect on the case signups that you're getting.
Both personally and professionally, for sure.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, that's really cool insight right there. So backing up to your firm itself, is there and I know you have a handful of attorneys that work with you. Is there what are the kind of your expertise areas that you do focus on, or what would you say sets you apart maybe from another firm in your area?
We don't try to spread ourselves too thin. I think one problem I see with small firms, or maybe even folks that are just working on their own, is that they want to say yes to everything because you want the business. And that definitely can be a great marketing tool and a way to get your bills paid. On the other hand, you can take and get yourself involved in some things you shouldn't. And like any other young lawyer, I definitely made that mistake at the beginning. You want to say, yes, I'm good at everything and can help you with everything. And I'm the guy.
I've been there.
Yeah.
We were there.
But that can run you in a circle. So we really concentrate on, of course, first and foremost, a personal injury, civil litigation. That's what you really build a firm on. There's really no such thing really in the United States as far as a massive, large criminal defense firm, because that's just not really the way it functions, no matter what state you're in. You may have some white collar type firms that are a little bigger, but generally speaking, those are not huge practices. So to grow, we really knew from the beginning we had to target the civil side. While, of course, coming from a criminal background, I was going to get a lot of that. And the criminal side is where you get a lot of earned media, meaning newspaper, radio, television, where you're not paying for it. They're just interested in your story, similar to, crime shows on television, that sort of thing. So it's an interesting dynamic on that side, that you could have a case that was relatively small as far as the amount of value in it for the firm, but then what you got on the other side of it within a criminal case, that is from the earned media. So it could be a small case coming in as far as paying the light bills, but a big case as far as putting your name out and getting on everything from local television to some national shows. So that was something I was fortunate to fall into, and then really trying to concentrate from there, Kevin, and the transition of using that name recognition to bring in other things and, the criminal aspect of it.
That is really cool. That's interesting. I've not heard that before. And that's a pretty cool strategy. I mean, you being kind of aware of that and saying, all right, we're going to ride this. We're going to use this and getting your name out there. That's great. It's good PR. It's good exposure. I think
the pigeonhole side of it is the other side. You got to take too much, and then you got the times that folks make a mistake and only take a certain thing and don't open themselves up because they feel really comfortable in a certain field. I try to meet somewhere in the middle. We do some small business. I'm actually growing that part of the practice. It's completely different than anything criminal, of course, as well as civil, but I tend to see a bleeding of that area into some other fields. And so we've really worked on that, bringing on an attorney this fall to do it full time. So I'm hoping that works, but like any other business and any other track you go down, it's not always successful, but you at least want to put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I started my agency originally, we worked with anybody that could pay us for something, and website, SEO, marketing. We had so many different industries that we were serving, and we finally got to the point where we knew we needed to focus and niche. And, now I say no a lot. So, and I can refer a lot and turn down the work,
right.
But it's rewarding to do that. And, it's nice that we've got to the point where we can do that. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think you got to stay in your lane, and not spread yourself thin. I think those are all definitely good points. And, I thought other lawyers were like, yeah, well, if someone just mentions this, and we don't do it, I'll see if I can, it's not really the best answer you want. So
no, definitely not. Not if it's something that's important to you, which if you're hiring a lawyer, it's going to be important, at least on some level.
That's going to cost you one way or another too, right? So
that's very true.
Yeah. So I love it. I love it. Okay. So any trends in the marketplace, the economy, in the law, regulations that you see potentially either affecting your business in a positive way or negative way that you see coming, in 5 years or next year or this year?
Well, Kevin, I think you're a perfect example of one. What we were talking about off air is that the SEO side of the legal world is going to get so much larger and so much more competitive than it already is. Not to say that it's not competitive, because it most definitely is, but it's nowhere in comparison to television marketing particularly. And we're already starting to see that more here. The younger generation firms are really getting into it from day one, from the second they hang their shingle. And then some of the older firms are having some young folks come in and work with them and saying, hey, I know you're not much into the computer Google stuff, but I can promise you it'll help, maybe even more than some of those television ads you're running in between the soap operas every day.
100%. I mean, SEO, Google's not going nowhere. And they're only investing more into keeping you on Google than even going to your website. So you got things like the local service ads, Google My Business, and then of course the Google ads themselves. But then they have SEO below it. And then you got the aggregators and the big fine laws and listing sites. And so it's just more competitive. So I've talked to a lot of older firms that, it's almost too overwhelming for them to even contemplate, and they just don't do anything. They just stick to their old methods and don't invest in SEO at all. Or, and then of course you got some that go all in and spend a lot of money per month. So yeah, it's a changing landscape all the time. Google's not going nowhere. They're only going to change it up and reward the ones that do it right. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where it goes. That's what we do. We stay on top of that as much as we can. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I already heard some plans for growth. I have big plans for my company to grow. What are your plans? What is the next, 5 year, 10 year? Do you have some big goals, whether it's a certain amount of attorneys, certain amount of locations, what you got brewing up?
Well, I think those are going to end up being kind of combined together. One thing we're really working and concentrating on is our Myrtle Beach office. We've had one there for several years, but only really had it beyond a satellite office for the last couple of years. I feel like that's a good market area that has some room to grow because the area population-wise is growing. And of course, there's a lot of attorneys that have been there a while and are getting a little up there in the years. So we feel like that's definitely an area that we're already in, but I would like to expand within that area. Beyond that, as you mentioned, definitely looking in other areas. South Carolina is a pretty heavy per capita state when it comes to attorneys, at least in the quote unquote larger cities. Some of the rural areas are places that I've looked at, had some success in the past. On different times we've done some campaigns. And so, I think too, on the expanding side, as far as the offices goes, or the locations, I should say, I'm more looking at trying to be a little off the beaten path than everybody else. But at the same time, maybe bleed into some of the higher populated areas. And from the attorney side, I mean, that really comes from demand. You have some firms that are huge in one particular spot or one particular segment of their state, and then other ones that cross over 6, 8, 10, 12, 25 states.
Sure.
And, sort of spread it out that way. I don't foresee, moving out of South Carolina. I take a lot of cases out of South Carolina on the criminal side where there's a connection here, someone's referred to me, but I don't look to expand into other states until we get, a much bigger stronghold here within South Carolina.
I mean, it sounds like a really good move. I was talking to a firm a little while back, and they were looking at it's almost like in between 3 or 4 different cities in a rural area, about kind of setting up shop in between versus being like in the major area itself. So that was interesting. And I think I've seen other firms too where they have a lot of satellite offices because you can get a Google My Business listing.
Exactly.
Leverage that and boost your SEO, and there's a lot of other benefits to it. And that's kind of, you have to have a real address these days. So very interesting. I like that a lot. So actually we've been, for the last couple of years, we travel, and I take the whole family to Myrtle Beach, using it for spring break. So been down there quite a few times.
It's wide open again already. So I'm looking for a good summer.
Excellent. Okay, so next question for me, and then we got a couple questions coming in too from LinkedIn and YouTube. We'll pull those up in a second. From a market, you mentioned SEO and trying to get better at that and diving in deeper, and then expanding and things like that with the locations. What do you feel from a marketing perspective you have done very well up to this point?
As far as doing very well, we've done pretty well with a smaller budget from a guerrilla marketing standpoint, using different marketing materials to get involved in things with the community, as well as working with volunteer work. So I'd say it was a lot of sweat equity as compared to some of the larger firms with a lot larger budgets. We've gotten pretty amazing name recognition through that process and continue. But one thing along with that, Kevin, is a caveat that a failure of ours is, you can do that and do it a little too big, do it a little too fast, or maybe feel like it's going the right direction. But if you're not tracking it on the way back in, you can really find yourself actually behind the 8 ball, because you really don't essentially know what is and what isn't working when you're going so many different directions. So that's one piece that I would say we have stumbled upon, unfortunately, throughout, and continue working on it. And for anybody that's listening or watching that is trying to move in the direction of expansion, just make sure you know not only where your money's going, but what came back from it after you put the money out there.
Excellent. Love it. Very important to track. I mean, data is everything. Even if
no one likes that. Data's boring, right? And you don't want to be the one collecting it. You're willing to read it on a sheet, but that's about it. And lawyers are bad for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think sometimes some people are overwhelmed with tracking all of it. But start easily. Like, we have clients where, like, someone on the phone will say, "Hey, how'd you hear about us?" And they mark it and they'll put it in a spreadsheet, and then we can get more complex and more advanced with systems and software and all kinds of stuff. But just collect something to say, "Hey, how did you actually hear about us?" Because another thing too is maybe they saw a TV commercial or a billboard, but they say Google because they Googled it after the fact, and then Google gets the attribution, or the marketing company does,
or vice versa.
Yeah. So it's like, well, what was the real source? Well, I actually saw your billboard and ended up going home, and that's unlikely, by the way. But you want to know the real information, so you know where to put your money or to pull your money out of.
Exactly, because you may be in some dead campaigns. I've found myself at times in dead campaigns and not even realized it, because the cases were still coming in, and you're thinking something's working. But again, if you don't have that data to prove it, it's only working in your head, probably not in your bank account.
See it all the time. So awesome stuff. Track everything you can. All right, we got a couple questions coming in here. I'll put them up here so you can see them. So Sean Ragsdale, all right, did you ever see a download trend in auto accidents during the pandemic as more people started working remotely, possibly not driving as much? And I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit in the beginning.
I mean, Sean's dead on. Absolutely. You have a lot less drivers. South Carolina is not huge, and maybe some of the listeners or folks watching, there's not a lot of mass transit here, meaning we don't have subway systems. We have, of course, a busing system, but it's not widely used. And so everybody drives essentially to work or to dinner or to their family's house or friend's house, that sort of thing. And so when the pandemic shut everything down, to a large degree, they're not going out. Again, also, as you mentioned, you and your family come down here. You may drive in a car down here. A lot more people do that. People aren't driving into your city or driving into a neighbor city, not being familiar with the area, and then getting in those wrecks. And then also your share rides, the Uber, Lyft, that type of stuff, they were almost non-existent. And those are also, great resources on cases when they happen. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest things that we're seeing pick up a lot is that auto accident side, since people now in our state is actually mandated that this month all state workers had to go back into office. A lot of private businesses have already done that. And so when you got people going to work, going out for social reasons, whatever the case may be, you're going to definitely see that trend going back up, and we are now for sure.
Interesting. This is a random question from me. The trucks I see down in Myrtle Beach that had the back jack down. What is that called? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Like the low riders, yeah.
Yeah, well, the front's up, but the back's down.
Yeah. You're going to see that in Myrtle Beach, that's for sure.
You're going to see that in Myrtle Beach. I would think they would wreck all the time because they're like looking straight up. And I've always been
maybe on some sort of substance as well.
It could be. You don't have one of those trucks, do you?
No, I don't.
I have a truck, but it's leveled.
Level.
Yeah. Sean, and then we get another question from Sean here. Which of your 4 offices was most affected by the pandemic? Interesting.
That's a good question. I would say by far my downtown Charleston office, just because the amount of businesses and the thriving businesses from various levels were shut down essentially and closed. The government offices were closed, the restaurants were closed. You didn't have any tourism coming in because why are you going to come spend money in a town that you can't do anything in? So that being Myrtle Beach arguably is a bigger tourist attraction for certain people. But I'd say that one and Myrtle Beach were by far the biggest.
Interesting. Okay.
The tourism aspect of it really came into play too, because you got your locals, but then when you add in so many thousands or hundreds of thousands of people every year to each of those towns, you're talking about a whole different ballgame that didn't exist for almost 12 full months.
All right. There you go, Sean. That's your answer. And then Zach Miller. How has David used awards to help market his business? So you said a lot of guerrilla marketing and doing things in the community. Question from Zach. Have you used awards?
I haven't done that a lot. I've won a decent amount of quote unquote awards like best of and stuff like that. And, we'll reference it maybe some on the website or in billboard campaigns if we have those or various other ways. But I feel like to some degree that's a flooded market as well. And so, while it may look great to one person to have 32 plaques on the wall, another person would look at it and say, what are you trying to prove? I don't think awards really bring you the credentials as far as who you are and what your firm's about, as do, of course, any mouth to mouth and that type of promotion. But yes, I would say I use it, but slightly to answer Zach's question.
Oh, there you go. It's a good answer. So yeah, we've done. I got probably words behind me here, but I think it's good from a local standpoint. We're nationally focused, of course, so it's less useful there. I think when we were focused more on local clients, doing more of a generalist type of firm,
right?
It helped and it got our name out there, and we love the awards. We're excited when we win something. And actually, Zach Miller is a friend of ours that asked that question. He always says, if you qualify, apply. So a lot of these awards, you might get them if you don't do anything, but if you apply to a bunch of them, you're probably more likely to win. But good PR, and but I agree. You don't want to overdo it and look
right.
like you're trying too hard, I guess. So.
Boasting, to say the least.
All right. Well, is there anything exciting happening? Anything else you want to? I mean, obviously the new office and the space, that's great. Anything else you want to share? Anything we can do to help you out? And then from there, I'll ask you to just how can people connect with you? How's the best to reach out to you?
Sure, no problem. Well, first of all, Kevin, I appreciate you having me on. It's always great to talk to other folks that are in the same or similar industries. I'm a little familiar with what you do, and I'm very familiar with what you do, and I'm a little familiar with your company, and it looks like you guys are doing a lot of the right things, including this, and I don't mean that because I'm on here. But I think one thing that I would say—
the best lawyer in the world on here today.
Exactly. There we go. So what I would say is, from our standpoint, we're excited about the growth of the building and the things like that, but also excited about bringing on different team members that maybe have some history with other companies or other firms and getting some different perspectives on things. Because one trend you always see in law is if somebody thinks one thing works, they tend to sort of stay with that and not look outside of that and put on blinders. So I would encourage anybody listening that is building their practice or starting their practices to be open-minded. You can't be everything to everyone, but you definitely can be a variety of different things to a lot of people, and you can really promote that variety in a lot of different ways.
I love that. Yeah, different perspectives, different ideas. I love that. So, but I know when I go to like our lawyer for our business and stuff like that, we're always looking for a different answer or a better answer, or go back to the drawing board. How else can we do this? And they were like, we're gonna figure it out some other way. Let's go. Let me talk to someone else. Let me go see what I can do. And that's nice. It's nice to have versus like, no, it's like, this is the only answer. So I like that. That's awesome. How could the audience connect with you? If is it LinkedIn? Reach out to you.
I mean, we're on all that stuff. I try to keep it simple though. Probably easiest way, since we got listeners from all over, they got other questions or things they would like to discuss, are welcome to reach me at davidaylor.com. or of course on Facebook, Instagram, all that. But I'm not going to give out the tag number because no one's going to remember the phone number anyway. But just remember David Aylor, and it's like Aylor, it's like Taylor with no T. And David Aylor Law Office is out of South Carolina. And if anybody wants to ask a question that's not being recorded and put all over the internet, they're welcome to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to help them in any way I can.
Excellent. Well, I posted your website address in the comments so that I go out to everyone. And yeah, anyone tuning in and listening, reach out to David. I'm sure you can find him on LinkedIn or any other social media, and he'll go back. Just reference the Managing Partners podcast, and I'm sure he'll be happy to help you out. So
he'll be first in line as soon as they reference that, right?
That's right. If I'm in South Carolina and I get an accident, I know who I'm calling.
Exactly. Or you're in South Carolina hanging out. Either way, just let me know.
I might just come see you and hang out anyway.
There you go.
I can do that. No problem. You go fishing?
Yeah, we'll have a good time. Don't worry about
that. Awesome. Well, David, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
We'll chat here in just a second too. But to everyone listening, thanks for the questions, and we'll see you soon.